Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. You are about to join a frequency that will open your mind, expand your heart, and activate your spirit. Thank you for joining Kelly Meehan, Spirit Baby Medium and Master Energy Therapist. Kelly believes in the power of the Spirit Baby. She speaks with babies in spirit before life, in the womb, and after life. She supports, teaches, and guides others to tune into the intuitive and mystical parts of life for greater wisdom. Join her in meeting your soul baby and build your connection and relationship with deep love and trust. Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio with your host, Spirit Baby Medium, Kelly.
Welcome to episode 87, May 8th, 2020. A Reclamation of the Feminine, Our World Destiny Enlightened by Mothers. What ways can women reclaim living an empowered life? How can living from your center provide what you seek? What does it mean for conception and pregnancy? How can mothering yourself support you? I have a special guest. Laura Eisenberg is a licensed professional clinical counselor, embodiment coach, somatic experiencing practitioner, yoga therapist, mindfulness instructor, and trauma touch therapist. She holds dual master's degrees in psychological counseling from Columbia University. She has extensive experience in education and stress management, trauma, addiction, anxiety, embodiment, sexual health, and awakening the feminine. Laura's mission is to assist females in restoring the natural harmony that exists between mind, body, and spirit, and to deepen their connection to the language of the body, sensation, desires, needs, intuition, and emotions. She truly believes an integral part of healing for women is to explore their emotional, psychological, spiritual, and sexual lives. An absence of any of these aspects of self can be impediment to the life filled with pleasure, power, and purpose. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and pleasure.
So wonderful. I always kind of go through, like, when I have a guest on, like, how did we meet? How did we connect? Like, now I'm like, my mind's like, because you're local and you were looking for pregnancy groups, I think it was, right?
Yeah, my acupuncturist, I was asking for someone who understood the deep, like, mystical and spiritual journey of motherhood and was open to more of a holistic, natural journey that I wanted to have with both birthing my baby and then afterwards, and my acupuncturist recommended you.
That's so wonderful. I wonder if I know your acupuncturist. I don't know. Maybe I do. But yeah, because I was like, wait, I probably should have, like, looked at that earlier. It's like, wait, how did we connect? That's right. And I know, and it's like, I feel like when you sent that message, it's like, oh yeah, I used to do in-person, like, groups, like pre-birth communication groups. It was so much fun. And then everything kind of really shifted more just virtual and World Wide Web but it was like, it just reminded me. And then when I saw your, website, I'm like, wait a second, what is this amazing work? We need to get this on the podcast, because everything, that you do, I feel like, is probably not just for women, but, there's so much involved, as we talked a little bit earlier, just even, moving into just, being a woman, with no children, to even a woman with a child or children. It's such a different experience and a different appreciation, I'm sure, for the creation of life. But I'd love to hear more. Where do we begin? There's so much to talk about. I love that you say you offer support and services for women and girls. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Coaching for women and girls.
Yeah, so I feel like, as I had mentioned, or as you had mentioned in the bio, the need for exploring all aspects of ourselves, and, physically, emotionally, spiritually, sexually. And I think that the conditioning in terms of what it means to be female starts really, really young. And I think that the objectification and the sexualization that we experience as girls and women really impacts our self-esteem, our ability to be embodied, to be fully expressed, to have a healthy sexuality. And I think it needs to start young. So for 12 years, I worked in a school. So I had a private practice for a large majority of that time as well. But then I worked in the school, and I would run girls groups. discussing all aspects. So I started with, the sisterhood wound, which is what brings up so much competition with girls, and body image and self-esteem and eating disorders. And a lot of there were even young girls, they were not eating right lunch. And when I would question them, it was a body image, related to body image. And I like this boy, or I like this boy. And so I realized that the work needs to start at a young age. And I've even had mothers call me for their daughters that were really struggling with body image. And I ended up working with the mother instead of the daughter, and the daughter ended up shifting. So I just think two things. One, it's helpful to start early if I do work directly with the daughter or a young girl, but it also is something that's passed on. So sometimes just working as women, as we shift internally, we can help change the trajectory of what happens with our girls. So I do both. And I no
really
longer in schools. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I'm no longer in the schools, but I still see teenagers and some girls. Majority of practice is still primarily women, but I do see some teenagers and some younger girls.
I was going to say, I love what you said about, looking at the girl, but also maybe the teenager, but also the reflection of her own mother. Like, it's so easy with our children to say, oh, it's them, or there's a fault, or it's like, but it's like it's in a relationship to another being and to this other kind of piece, I feel like. And I really love that you said that, because it's so easy to blame everybody and go, oh, it's them, it's not me. But as you shared, it's like the mother, looking at her own maybe emotional wounds or her own connection, and then her daughter's behavior and energy even changing on that level. And then it brings me even further back into conception, or pregnancy. There's so much energy involved in being provoked, right? It's like, oh, there's feelings that come up. And even with women that struggle in conception, I know there's a lot that have mother wounds. They talk about their mother wounds. And I always tell women, we have traumas and mother wounds, but it doesn't mean you're not going to have a child, right? It's like there's so many different more elements to that. But even you talk about sisterhood wound, I've never heard that word before.
Do you want me to elaborate, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Because first of all, I just want to also just what you just said in terms of the motherhood wound. Both of those, motherhood wound and sisterhood wound, I think are imperative to explore, to feel more fully expressed as a woman. Because the motherhood wound, right, it's passed down generation, and it's like a mini trauma of this sense of I'm less than, I'm not enough. And that is like on a cellular level, right, because of all the years of patriarchy and sort of experiences of like sexist behaviors and attitudes. And then the sisterhood wound, I feel like also is connected to the oppression of women, the historical oppression of women, where if you think of like a cosmetic industry, right, there's an ad that says you're not enough the way you are. You need to have this makeup, or you need to have this plastic surgery. There's a sense of, then when we see another sister, competition, oh, they have more of this, or they look like this. So all of these industries play us against one another, and I think it leaves us disempowered. And when we're disempowered, we can't come together to realize our strength, because we're powerful in unity, right? When we come together, that's how we really can feel our power and claim our worth. But when certain industries and like this patriarchal structure, again, it's not against men. Patriarchy isn't an ideology. It's everyone's a product of it. Everyone is conditioned by it. But when it devalues women or look at women and girls and their worth is based on their body, you feel like I'm an object. There's something wrong with me. And if you see another object that looks like it has something that you don't have, then there's a competition. They have this and I don't have it. And it becomes, you judge the other based on their external versus their internal. And there's a sense of, I think, competition that we feel from very, very, very young of who's the prettiest or who has the nicest body, or right. So we start that really young, and so the competition and that sisterhood wound begins very, very, very young. And that's why I always emphasize when we see a sister, let's talk about their inner beauty. You know, I love the way that you're just so compassionate. Or, like, you know, I used to tell the girls when I was working with a lot of them and doing groups in schools, you know, notice, instead of saying, oh my gosh, I love your outfit, say, wow, when you shared your meal with me, I just felt really good. I really appreciate how generous you are, right? So it shifts the orientation from the outer to the inner, and so the worth is derived from within versus, you know, all these industries and the media that says your worth is based on the way you look.
And how hard that is nowadays because of social media and TikTok and Facebook. It's like, woof, like this is really even pushing us harder because it's really showing like, look at me, look at this. But I love this, the way that you share that and how important that is. And I have boys, so I always, you know, I'm like, what will it be like for boys, which is probably a little different, like what their role is and how can, you know, even how they think and process. I'm thinking of my friends who have girls, and I could see them getting older now, over age 10 and up, and that's when you start seeing a lot of the cattiness or a lot of the, you know, the I'm rich, you're poor, or I'm pretty, you're ugly, you know, that stuff like starts coming up. I'm sure it's different with boys though too, and I'm like, what will that look like?
Yeah, I think one of the gifts though is when, like, you having boys and them learning how to relate to females in a way that's honoring, heals the female, and also working on how to soften them and to awaken their feminine women. So I think that it's a gift to, especially someone like you, having boys and them seeing the soft feminine and learning how to treat a female that will heal a female.
Yeah, because even what you're talking about, like, trauma and generational, you know, things, it makes me think right now of, I host in my little healing room up here, I call it, in my little mountain space, with some of the moms and non-moms. It's just a group that started in 2019 strong, and we would go monthly, and it's just been really beautiful to sit with other women with all their stuff, you know, all their issues, and we do different things each time, and just to, like, you know, be playful and expand. And one time I had them all bring poems, and I was like, oh gosh, they're going to, like, hate me. And I said, can you write your own? And it was, like, so invoking. Like, I have to share words from inside of me. It was interesting how it brought up so much for people, but at the same time, they were so excited. I was just blown away. I was, like, shocked that it created such an impact, because it created so much fear. And then it created so much excitement, and then they got to share, and we all were just listening, you know. It wasn't like, bravo for what you wrote. It was like, oh, wow, you know, that's deep, or I really resonated with that, or whatever people wanted to share about it. But it just, I feel like we're, like, kind of going back in these circles and, like, connecting with our own little girls in some level because of the way we all kind of grew up. Because I do feel like a lot of people do grow up, like, with so many issues, right? I mean, that's just life.
Yeah.
I laugh because I'm going, well, I don't know anybody that hasn't been like, oh, well, there's the pretty one, there's the rich one, there's the skinny one, there's the fat one, whatever comes up, and how it just, you know, it continues to move, I guess, in different ways. But maybe that's just, I'm only speaking from my reality. I shouldn't be so general, but I'm always opening to go, where is this? You know, these young girls now, it's so beautiful. I was hosted a part of a moon blessing for a young girl who had her first period. And I've never got to experience my own celebration. And so I was like, wow. And I sat with the mom, and we, you know, the mom, you know, built this very creative woman, has a lot of, lived around the world. So she has a lot of background in all these different kind of cultures, and just made this gorgeous, you know, space for her. And we made an altar, and we had moms there talking about their first bleed, their first moon, and in the nice pieces, I should say, not like the tragic part, because that's there, but just like, what was it like? And leaving out pieces, I was, you know, we kind of informed them not to be like, oh, I felt abandoned or fearful, or like, they'll figure all that out later, whatever it comes up for them. But it's more of like, I remember my first bleed, it was here at this time, I think it was this month. And just to show the memory, and then, you know, and then how that creates something else, right? That when you have your moon. This was a young group too. They started, there was a young bleeding group, so I feel like 10 and 13 are very different. This was more 10-year-olds, so you have to, you're not going into your womb's ready to conceive or where's your sexual energy, because it's really not there as of like very hyper alert yet. And so I just imagine like bringing back all these moon ceremonies and circles to the young girls to see, you know, how to bring the healing through. And of course, this, I'm sure, sitting in this circle it really impacted the mothers, right? I mean, of course.
Yeah. There's this, and from what you say too, it's almost like so many of us didn't have that blessing for ourselves. So then we can reflect and wait, can we do it for ourselves now? We didn't get it back then. You know, maybe doing it for ourselves now, or actually feeling the blessing as we bring our daughters or someone else's daughters through it. Actually feeling the healing that occurs and the celebration of it for our own maiden. As we're facilitating it for another.
Have to say, yeah, and I'm glad that you say that, because I did feel that way with this little girl, and I got to meet the mother, the matriarch, right? And she came from a very poor country, like where she literally had no shoes, and now she's like beautiful woman over 70, and she shared this song, which was so gorgeous. It was from her mother, like singing in the village, because that was her gift of sound, and we like it, so it was like the great grandmothers. I get chills just even saying that, because I got to sit and be a part of it, because I feel like my family tree is a lot of lost information. And so sitting with this, like literally, you know, 3 bodies of women, from the young girl, the mother, the grandmother, and then even from the spirit, you know, the ancestors, where we had that song come through, it was very changing, and it was very like, you know, emotional for everybody. And but I love that you said that, because I can't go back and take a time machine, and my mom and them, they are who they are. And like there's, you know, but it's like, you know, I'd love to shift into the conversation now is, so, you know, we're in this space now as women, maybe on a conception journey, maybe not, where with traumas, you know, with how do you see, you know, maybe that's too general to say, how do you see traumas for people, and when is it that people come to you that go, I have a big trauma, or maybe people are in denial, they don't even realize, but they're walking around with stuff that feels suffocating. What can you say about that?
Yeah, I guess when people come to me, I mean, some people know the work, some of the work that I do is somatic experiencing, and then just looking at my studies in feminine psychology. They usually come because trauma often manifests a lot of times with, you know, there's lots of anxiety or panic or depression, you know, depending on sort of their self-protective response that they're stuck in, like a fight, flight, or freeze. The symptoms will manifest differently. Or sometimes people have kind of chronic pain or some sort of autoimmune disorder where when the, you know, traumatic energy is bound in the system for so long, it affects the organs and systems in the body. So sometimes it's a physical complaint, sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's just a sense of stagnation, right? They're not connected to their life force. It can be more of like a freezy quality. And they come because they want to feel, maybe it's a relationship where they're feeling not fulfilled. Maybe it's more their own ability or desire to feel more self-expressed and self-actualized. Actually, I've had people come because of conception. Now, if they're on a conception journey, I wouldn't go deeply into a trauma. However, I would resource them. I would provide enough resources for them and start to identify obstacles that may be holding them back to work through it as much as I can, so that they can. Well, actually, it depends. Let me just go back for a second. If they have conceived, I wouldn't go into a trauma after. If they're trying to conceive, that could be a block. So let me kind of rephrase that. It depends where they are in their conception journey. Because if they have conceived, then I obviously want to work on focusing on the energy focused on the development of this being inside. But prior, yes, there's many, many different reasons why people come. And I do see some men, but like I said, my practice is primarily women looking for some growth. A lot of people also, because I have this background in erotic empowerment and coaching and spirituality, they'll also come to explore their sexuality, whether they're single or with a partner. That will help if they are looking to conceive at some point, or if they are just looking to create a project, right? Because the womb center is that area of creativity. So if they're wanting to create something in the world, maybe it's not a child. We really need to work on the connection in the womb space and what in life and the heart and what in life has impacted them in a way where they're feeling a sense of disconnect from their creativity, from their emotional world, from their deep sense of self as a woman. And so I would say that there's so many different kinds of reasons, but there is a sense of something feels incomplete, something feels like it's keeping me down.
Yeah, I love how you just I feel like that's such a great definition of looking at, what because it's like, what is this trauma? Like, what does this mean? And just everything. It was like, oh yeah, all these different pieces, of course, immune stuff, depression, anxiety, sexual. I almost feel like the word sexual and trauma go together, and that maybe that's my own psyche stuff because it's what I hear all the time. And I'm going, my gosh, like there's so much connected to that. And as we know with the movement, even now with the Me Too movement, it brings this whole other piece to like what was always really. And then, I don't know anybody, not one person that doesn't Me Too, or however you would say that. Do you know what I'm saying? And so,
yeah,
of course, there's sexual trauma. Of course, I mean, geez, that's almost a given.
Yeah, and I wanted to just piggyback on that. When I worked at a recovery center for a while, running feminine groups, like feminine awakening groups, and somatic experiencing, just doing different things on trauma healing and stress management and embodiment. And one of the things that I talked about a lot, and when I offered presentations as well at that same different recovery centers, was that we might not think about what the experience of walking down the street and someone saying something about the way that we look, hollering at us and objectifying us, how that impacts us. But these are all mini stressors. Someone making a sexist joke. All of these are mini stressors that can feel like, there's sort of like a mini trauma, that these stressful experiences of being an object or exposed to sexist remarks or being looked at a certain way when you're walking down the street, that's a violation. So we may not have been touched physically, but energetically we've been violated. And experiencing that in your lifetime, even though you haven't had one big sexual trauma where people might explain that as someone touched me. I don't even think you need to be touched. I think you just need to be in society and be treated a certain way, right? Just like racism, ageism, things like that. But we're talking about sexuality here more with females. And so I think that just by being born into a female body, a female identified body, that this is what we can experience. That can feel like a trauma.
Wow. Yeah. So do me a favor and explain. I probably should have you explain this because I know people are tuning in and may not know. What is somatic experiencing?
Yeah, so that's a body-mind form of healing, of trauma resolution and really managing chronic stress. So it looks at how, like, animals in the wild do not get traumatized because their ability to sort of shake it off, where with humans, we can get stuck in this fight, flight, freeze response. And these, like, self-protective responses that need to emerge that weren't able to emerge. So I'll give you that example of a woman walking down the street and someone's catcalling and saying something about her body. she might shut down and freeze. That'd be her automatic response, where what she really wanted to do was say something, stop, or put her hands up and say stop. And so she may go home and she's frozen and she's shooken up because there was a bunch of people that were just saying something about the way she looks. So she comes home and she's sort of like really shooken up, but it's like a thwarted self-protective response. What she really wanted to do was put her hands up, right? That's sort of the body behavior, hands up, and then say stop. And that would be a fight response, like a healthy fight response. But say this happens all over, again and again, and she continues to freeze. So that these can feel like, okay, this felt traumatic for her. This has happened, and she wasn't able to have a healthy fight response, or maybe run like a healthy flee response out of that situation. And really she tends to freeze. So these are like mini traumas. So we're looking at like, what are the thwarted self-protective responses that wanted to emerge that couldn't? And how does that affect like all the systems, the musculoskeletal system? How does it affect all of the systems in the body where this like traumatic energy is bound up in the system? And what happens is, like I mentioned, that's where the anxiety comes, the depression comes, autoimmune. There's a lot of physical manifestations of that, because you have traumatic energy bound up in the system that needs to be released. And then you have these self-protective responses that wanted to emerge, and due to fear or whatever, didn't. And we need to complete those incomplete responses.
I really love the traumatic energy, the way you said that. And I feel like this is really valuable for people to hear, because, I studied somatic psychology, but, not somatic experiencing, which is, I feel like the next level if I were to do something like that. But even just you talk about it, just brings me back to like, oh, it'd be so great to go deeper into that space, not just for myself, even for others. And I do some somatic work, but in this kind of I know somatic work, there's so many different pieces of that. And so when you talked about the somatic energy, like I could really feel that, like, oh, that bound up energy, and what's the story that's being held? Like you said, it could be really small, but it's like, how do we know how it's going to impact that person in maybe a larger way? Or it could be something really big. And then maybe that bigger trauma is like a work in progress, which I feel like many of us may really connect with that and go, yes, I have this one issue and it's a work in progress. Or there's like these small pieces. And even that, when you talk about like, and it's like how to disperse the energy, right? It's like, if let's say somebody's freezing all the time, then what happens, right? If you're just in frozen all the time, then that energy kind of goes somewhere in your body, right? Is that, it's like, how does it have the permission to move out, or does sickness become the truth and reality? And it made me think about women that are on a conception journey, and then maybe going year after year and questioning, what's going on with my body, what's going on with my baby, what's going on with my relationship, or maybe, if it's a solo conception, there's no relationship, but what's going on? And it reminds me too, even of, I've seen women go into very abusive experiences with using intervention, even like doing, a lot of things to their body that really hurt their body, and that bring them into levels of trauma that, to me, sometimes I know in my work I get people that they're not maybe in the beginning of their conception, they're kind of exasperated or overwhelmed, looking for the spiritual and energetic component to it. And some people, and I've been very honest with them, I'm like looking at their energy field and just seeing how they want to unwind stuff. It's just not an overnight process, but I do say that, what is the abuse? I'll use those words with people, the abuse that happens when the chronic injections or the force, there was a woman who had paralysis in her leg because she was just injecting and just, or women that not to scare women out of intervention, but do damage. But I do feel like our bodies can kind of regroup and our cells can regenerate and come back to some sense of balance. What can you speak about? I don't know if your experience or connection with infertility, or just even with the conception journey for people that are, releasing traumas, that are trying to find, how they can become mothers and parents in certain, whether it's their womb or whether it's a borrowed womb.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I have had people that we were just working together for a while, and then they embarked on a journey of trying to conceive and had difficulty. And I think that one of the big things that I really believe in is finding the balance. So if a woman wants to do intervention, to me, so let's say like we have masculine and feminine energies. The masculine energy is that doing, do an intervention, check when am I ovulating, all of those action oriented, but we need to balance that with the feminine. And because especially if there has been like stress or trauma or experiences that we say in somatic experiencing have been too overwhelming for the system to be able to like manage and integrate, right? That could be a trauma, just the nervous system is on overload. It was too much for the person to be able to integrate. So especially if there is that, we have to bring back the feminine, not just like, I'm going to do this. The feminine is the sensuality, the embodiment, the pausing, the restoration, the heart-centered relatedness. So, the cooperation, it's like, how do we come back to our feminine, juicy selves and enjoy the process? So it's not so linear. It's really about exploring and enjoying our own sensual, erotic self. And when I say eroticism, I don't mean, the energy localized in the genitals. I mean, like, what makes you come alive and following what makes you come alive, whether that's something that smells delicious, I'll have people buy just really comfortable material, like blankets, comforters that are really, really soft, so they can kind of just roll around in it and just really feel what it feels like against their skin. Music that just delights you, it makes your body want to move. Foods that just feel like delicious and just feel ecstatic on some level, right? It's just so good. So really awakening the senses and treating the body as a temple. So there's a balance between the feminine and the masculine. It doesn't become just about what interventions, what do I eat, what vitamins do I take, how, to make it happen. It's a fortune making it happen. It's a softening into what's arising. How is my stress level? Have I had various traumas that are sort of propelling me into this depression or this high sympathetic charged anxiety state? And do I need to look at those traumas and resolve them? Or do I just need to, I haven't had that many traumas, I just have a very stressful life, or I just worry a lot. Do I need to find practices so that my physiology is more regulated and my nervous system is more balanced and my organs and tissues and cells can be more nourished by this more embodied, sensual, juicy state? You see what I'm saying? So I think that a lot of times on the conceptual journey is a lot of do versus like really indulging in the feminine awakening, which is being and luxuriating in this body temple, and sense pleasure and stress, looking at that. So there's a lot of factors and sometimes it's just about playing with our sexual journey too, where sometimes people think, that's intercourse. No, maybe, you want to play with relating sexually in other ways and exploring your body in other ways, either alone or with a partner, just to kind of move a lot of that energy through and around.
I'm all like, sign me up. I feel like what you're saying, it's, the whole sensual. I know that in my own life over the many years, especially after the birth of my children, I actually felt like they awakened my sensuality and sexuality in a way that before it was more damaged, let's just say, to put it nicely. But it also was very hard, but it was like, what is this? And I love that idea of, like, you talk about, like, the softness on your skin, like feeling that, and maybe even a warm bath or smelling oils, or even taking it to sexual pleasure for the self, or like you said, in partnership, because I do feel like, in a conception journey, the sexual energy is important, but I also feel like a lot of people are scared to talk about that part or to go there, or it's like the conversation. And I know it definitely is, a self, discovery journey. Whereas my dearest friend said, I want to be my first sexual partner should be myself. And I was like, whoa, like
right.
that sounds so simple. But I was like, yeah,
Right.
because there's something when you start looking, oh, my sexual partner is another, but no, let it be yourself first and then someone second. And I really loved that. And I really was like holding that, like, yeah, like even our own self-discovery, I know that there's a lot of shame for women, a lot of flapping of the hands or don't touch your body, don't, especially down there, like, let's not talk about it. And so now as
Right.
women, we're coming into maybe some more sensual and sexual freedom, but there's still, especially, with intervention conception, it's not sexy. I tell some women it is not sexy. It's not going to be. But also, how do you then bring in the sensuality? As you're saying, I feel is so important. And I know there's so many people that tune in on a conception journey to really look at that maybe next angle of creativity and the full embodiment experience. It's not just, oh, it's this. It's like, okay, I'm going to go, paint my toenails. And it's like, well, there's so much more than that act of self-care, self-pleasure. It's like, it's many things. And I do see some women that have gone on a very long journey that can be very more doer. It's interesting you say it, it's like they're doing, but even in their creativity, they want to do in a sense where then it loses its fluidity, right? It's like, and that's the piece, right? It's the mental piece that's like, well, look, I have a list and I did the bath, I did the oils. And you're like, wait a minute, you have a list?
Yeah.
Then where's the spontaneity? Where's the spontaneity and the mystery of the unknown, which is a big piece too. Otherwise, it's just people living and doing, right? All the time, the state of doing when they think they're being creative. What can you say about that?
Yeah, I think there's that balance between doing and surrender. And there may be sort of a goal or objective or, things that you could do to arrive to where you want to get to, but there has to be also a daily turning over and a daily surrender. So you know where you're going, but the journey to get there has to be a journey of being and aliveness and pleasure. If you don't enjoy the journey, it will impact the end result. So you may not enjoy aspects of the journey, but let's say if there's like specific treatments, you may not enjoy that part. But what about when you walk out? Let's say you just received a treatment, you walk outside, and you decide that when you walk outside, you're going to smell every single flower that you pass. You're going to feel the sun on your skin. You're going to feel the embrace of your partner or whoever's, some women do it alone. Maybe it's a friend or a parent or someone that's supporting them, but feeling the touch of another. So how do we find the balance between doing, right? These are interventions. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to eat. And daily, and I'm turning it over. And I'm surrendering to this process. Ultimately, it's out of my hands. I could do, it's like the serenity prayer. So if people don't say the word God or goddess or being or whatever, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Like, what can you change and control? What can't you control? And how, and to really cultivate and develop that wisdom of knowing the difference, that some things are just out of our hands. The results are out of our hands as long as we know that we did everything we could and we enjoyed the process as best as we can. Again, not every aspect of the process, because sometimes it's really difficult, but in between those difficult moments, just feel the breath. Just look at a loved one, eat something, feel something. So it's really that balance between the doing and the surrender. And if I may, I want to just add one thing about the sexuality journey, but I want to just see did you want to respond to what I just said?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I think there's been more of, like, in terms of the sexual model, more of a male, heterosexual, male-dominated model of sexuality being performance-based. And it really is more of a multidimensional journey of sexuality entails our spiritual journey, our emotional journey, our psychological journey, our spiritual journey, and our energetic journey. So all of these aspects of ourselves contribute to our sexuality. And I do believe, like what you mentioned, that it's really important to know and understand our own body and our own pleasure, and to take some time to explore that so we can tell another, if we are in a relationship with another, what we enjoy, so we can make our journey more pleasurable, whether it's our journey to conception or our journey in life. It's more pleasure, and sexuality is not necessarily intercourse, right? There's so many ways to be sexual. So just to explore our bodies and see what feels good, and remember that it's a holistic model, and it entails our emotions, you know, what we tell ourselves, what we feel, our physical body, how, you know, are we like feeling anxious, depressed, like that all impacts it, our psychological, our spiritual, and our energetic. So all of this will impact our sexual self. It's not just performance.
Yeah, there's so many amazing and beautiful things that you've shared. I feel like it's so ongoing, but I'd love to hear, as we're coming to the end, I know you have programs and different things, but this book here, I really love the title, and I'm like, I need to get this book and to see what it's about. It's called Trauma Resolution for the Empowered, Awakened Female, Mind, Body Practices for Emotional, Physical, and Spiritual Balance. Is this like, can you get this separate from the program, or is it together?
It's together, but they can also get it separately. They could, well, it was on Amazon, but also I can see, I want to see if it's still up there, but if not, I think if people are interested, I can kind of send you a link maybe so that they can access it.
And so what is the basic idea of this book?
So it does explain a lot about somatic experiencing and trauma, basically. So it explains about trauma and different kinds of trauma and different practices to find resolution, whether it's like yogic practices, other sort of breathing techniques, other kind of mind-body practices. Now, that doesn't take the place of, I think if there has been trauma or just ongoing chronic stress, reading the book, it's educational, it's informative. I share my own journey, but I do think that, you know, if one realizes, like, yeah, this is me, that getting sessions and support is really important on our journey. But there is really good information about what trauma is, the different kinds of trauma, and what you can do. And I share my journey, because usually when there's trauma, there's some sort of coping mechanism, right, or compensatory behavior, whether that be food or drugs or alcohol or sex or codependency or gambling or something. And I had a journey with food and sugar. So from the outside, I looked like there was nothing wrong, right? I was thin and took care of myself, but I did have a sugar addiction, and it really impacted my body, mind, and spirit in many, many ways. And I also had a little bit of love addiction, where I needed the attention of the other to feel worthy. And, you know, so there was things that I needed to look at to really free myself from the bondage. And there's my story in the book as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And I would love to hear just ways that people can learn about you, you know, connect with your programs, your work, your websites, your email.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I have two web addresses. One is for counseling and psychotherapy in the state of California, and then there's the coaching. So the coaching is my Body Mind Wellness. So BODYMIND Wellness, WELLNESS.com. And then the counseling, the psychotherapy, is just LaraEisenberg.com. They can email me. That's Sacred Heal, SACREDHEAL, at gmail.com. And then also signing up for my newsletter, which is on my website. And I'll see about getting the book, too. I'll see if I can get a link to you if people want to access that book. They can also email me directly.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then I have my coaching and
go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is the coaching and counseling program. So just the coaching and counseling programs of exploring all aspects of being a woman and really awakening to their sexual, erotic self and finding that balance emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. So.
No, I wanted to say, to add to that, I wanted to shout out a congratulations to you for the birth of your daughter not too long ago.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes. It's been quite a journey and initiation, and I've learned so much and have so much more wisdom and strength and clarity about what it means to be a woman, whether people have had a child or not. We're so sacred. Life comes through us, and there's nothing like holier or sacred than that.
Thank you so much for being here on this Mother's Day month, as you are mother in so many different levels to your daughter and to probably many other people as well. And thank you for being on Spirit Baby Radio.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a joy.
Thank you for joining episode 87, May 15th, 2020, A Reclamation of the Feminine, Our World Destiny Enlightened by Mother.
This is Spirit Baby Radio. Thank you for joining Kelly in the energy of awareness, love, healing, and soul communication. Please join the next episode at www.soulbabycommunication.com.